Not too long ago, I purchased this British shilling. It's from the reign of King George I and is dated 1723. The obverse of the coin is typical of a silver British shilling of the time. There's a right-facing portrait of King George I, surrounded by the abbreviated legend Georgius, DG, MBR, FR, et HIB, Rex, FD. Georgius, Dei Gratia, Magnae Britanniae, Franciae, et Eburnii, Rex, Fidei Defensor, which, translated from the Latin, means George by God's grace, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, and Defender of the Faith. Incidentally, it was in George I's reign that the motto Fidei Defensor, Defender of the Faith, first appeared on British coins, and the motto has remained on British coins since then. Likewise, the reverse of the shilling has the typical legend of George I's reign, which is Brun et Eldux, SRIATH et EL, followed by the date. That legend stands for Brunsvicensis et Lundbergensis Dux, Sacri Romani Imperii, Archi Thesaurarius et Elector, which translated means Duke of Brunswick and Lundberg, Arch-Treasurer and Elector of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, this is certainly a lengthy legend, but it was a necessary one, since George I was the first British monarch of the House of Hanover, which was a German royal house, and George I retained his titles to the lands in Germany that he held before becoming King of Great Britain and Ireland. As such, the shillings of George I's time had on the reverse the shields of Great Britain, France, Ireland, and those German states. Now, the fields between the shields are typically empty or contain roses and plumes, which were symbols of British royalty, but on this shilling there are the letters SS and C, which indicate that this shilling is a South Sea Company issue. And the story of the South Sea Company is an interesting one. The South Sea Company was chartered in 1711 as a British business venture with the goal of trading with the Spanish colonies in South America. This is the armorial, the coat of arms, of the South Sea Company. A large part of this venture was to expand the slave trade in South America, which of course was a terrible reality of that time. Furthermore, when the South Sea Company was founded, Great Britain was at war with Spain. In fact, much of Europe at that time was embroiled in the War of Spanish Succession. So trading with the Spanish colonies was out of the question as this war was being waged. However, there was the expectation that the war would soon come to an end, and treaties would be signed that would open the Spanish colonies in South America to British shipping, and the South Sea Company was the British government's choice to do this. The South Seas trade was considered a choice financial prize for whoever obtained it because much of Great Britain's foreign trade outside of Europe was made with India and in the East Indies. Trading with the South Seas, or South American colonies, was desirable for a number of reasons. The first was geography. The South American colonies were much more easily accessible than those in India and the Pacific. Moreover, countries in the East Indies would only sell their goods for gold and silver, whereas the Spanish South American colonies, which were producing enormous amounts of gold and silver, would happily pay for British goods with gold and silver that was mined in South America. So trading with the South Seas colonies would result in much-needed silver and gold flowing back into Great Britain and not the other way around. If the South Sea venture proved successful, then the British government could also get a share of the South Sea Company's revenue through taxation, which was another incentive for the government to see that the South Sea Company was created. But the wealthy individuals who founded the South Sea Company realized early on that they only had enough capital to outfit a small number of ships. Also, none of the founders in the company had any experience at all trading with South America. So from the outset, there was a genuine doubt among the founders that the South Sea Company would ever be all that profitable as a commercial trading venture. Despite these concerns, the founders of the South Sea Company persevered, because they believed that if the South Sea Company was marketed as a lucrative business venture that had the backing of the British government, then the company and its founders would eventually become very wealthy. But they also realized that this wouldn't happen right away. The War of Spanish Succession ended in 1713, and in 1714, the first trade journey of the South Sea Company was made. In 1715, King George I was named the governor of the South Sea Company, and the South Sea Company continued to send trading ships to South America in 1716, 1717, and in 1718. During that time, the South Sea Company rented an impressive building in London's financial district and spent much time and money promoting the soundness and prestige of the company in the local press. But the South Sea Company posted only modest profits in these first few years. However, through political maneuvering, the founders of the South Sea Company managed to gain an enormous amount of investment from a rather unconventional source. But there's a backstory here, because financially, not all was going well for the British government at the time. Years of founding colonies and waging wars had taken a heavy toll on the British treasury, and Great Britain at this time was heavily in debt. It's estimated that the total debt of the British government was valued at almost £9 million. These debts were in the form of loans that were made to the British government by banks and wealthy individuals, with the government promising to make payments on these loans at regular intervals. Now here's the interesting, if not dubious part, that the South Sea Company played in this matter. The founders of the South Sea Company saw this as an opportunity to use the company as a vehicle to consolidate the British government's debt. The founders and many of the investors in the South Sea Company had influence in the British government, and in 1719, the British Parliament passed a law that required that any existing British government debt must be converted from loans into stock shares in the South Sea Company. The idea was that the South Sea Company stock shares would earn the lenders more money than they would earn through their loans to the British government. The benefit for the British government in passing this law was that through this stock conversion, the British government would greatly decrease its national debt. But in order for this plan to work, the conversion to South Sea Company stock had to seem beneficial for all parties involved, particularly the lenders. So, in addition to any dividends that would be paid through the South Sea Company stock, the British government committed to investing money in the South Sea Company each year, which would further increase the value of the South Sea Company stock and its dividends. As this mandatory stock conversion occurred, the founders of the South Sea Company put the next step of their plan into action and marketed the South Sea Company as being an excellent and well-funded investment opportunity for the general public. And by 1720, things got interesting. In February of 1720, stock in the South Sea Company was offered to the public at a price of £129 per share, an enormous amount of money at the time. Yet, investors, large and small, bought into the idea figuratively and literally, and investment in the South Sea Company steadily increased through the purchase of its stock. Some investors bought the stock with cash, and others took out loans and mortgages to buy the stock. But by the end of February, stock in the South Sea Company rose to £160 per share, and by April, South Sea Company stock was selling close to £300 per share. One of the investors who initially purchased South Sea stock was Sir Isaac Newton, the famous scientist, mathematician, and supervisor of the Royal Mint. Newton commented to his friends that the rise in price of the South Sea Company stock was completely illogical and unsustainable. So, Newton decided to sell his stocks in the South Sea Company in April at a large profit from the original purchase price. When he was asked about what caused the sudden increase in the stock's price, Newton said that he could, quote, calculate the movement of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of the people. However, eager and frenzied investors continued to buy shares of South Sea Company stock. After all, the South Sea Company was portrayed as an extremely profitable company with major investors, and had no less than the King of England serving as its governor. Stock in the South Sea Company continued to rise based on increased public demand, and by May, South Sea Company stock was selling at £600 per share, and by the end of June, the price had reached £900 per share. Again, keep in mind this stock was selling at £129 per share only 5 months earlier. But the rise in price continued unabated. By August of 1720, one share of South Sea Company stock was trading at £1,000 per share. Many investors in the South Sea Company did indeed become quite wealthy, on paper at least. However, troubles arose when some of the early investors and founders in the South Sea Company, those who had connections with Parliament and engaged in what we would today call insider trading, chose to sell their South Sea Company stocks when the price reached its peak. In the process, they made enormous amounts of money from the sale of their stocks. That rapid cashing out, however, caused a stock bubble to occur and a resulting panic. The value of South Sea Company stock dropped from £1,000 per share in August to £755 per share in September, and down to £160 per share by the end of the year. As a result of this bubble, investment in other British commercial stocks also decreased, and bankruptcies increased, which resulted in an economic crisis in the country and questions about the mismanagement and the government's role in the South Sea Company. Newspapers at the time published articles and cartoons depicting the rise and fall of those who foolishly invested in the South Sea Company. This is a cartoon that was published towards the end of 1720, and it depicts investors foolishly climbing and falling from a tree and then drowning in the waters of the South Sea. In the aftermath of this bubble, many of the investors in the South Sea Company were financially ruined, and the House of Commons ordered an inquiry into how and why the South Sea Company stock saw such a quick rise and fall in its value. Some members of the British government who were investors in the South Sea Company, including the king himself, were shielded from any scrutiny, but certain directors of the company, those who reaped the huge rewards when they cashed out their stock, were accused of fraud and were ordered to pay back the profits they made. Despite this bubble and the bad press and the government's inquiry, the South Sea Company continued its shipping trade with the Spanish colonies, and that financial story of the South Sea Company brings us back to the shilling. Because in 1723, the Royal Mint, still, by the way, under the supervision of Sir Isaac Newton, produced these coins with silver that was obtained by the South Sea Company in their trading ventures and was paid to the British government. This would be the only year that the Royal Mint would produce coins with the letters SSC on these shillings, as well as on certain sixpences, half-crowns, and crowns. Perhaps seeing the king's portrait and the letters SSC on its coinage was a way to bolster continued, albeit moderate, confidence in the company that helped the British government get out from under its crippling debt, open trade with one of England's former enemies, and still counted many British aristocrats among its investors and directors. If you're interested in obtaining coins with the South Sea Company marks, then they're relatively easy to find. A worn circulated example of a South Sea Company shilling can be purchased for $25 or so, and finer examples of the shilling sell in the $100 to $200 range. As an aside, or as a connection, keep an eye out for my next Rivendell Coin Cipher Challenge because a South Sea Company shilling will play a role in that puzzle. I hope that you enjoyed the story of the South Sea Company, a company that was backed by the British government, engaged in the slave trade, was run by unscrupulous directors, survived a major stock bubble, yet would continue as a British commercial shipping venture for another 100 years. Thanks for watching.